A universe devastated by war has only one last hope for peace.
Your time is coming on!
The survival of this universe hangs in the balance on the next Babylon 5.
You have transmissions holding.
Patch incoming signal. Full audio and video decode.
Purple files accessed.
What you are about to see has never been shown to anyone outside the Grey Council.
Hello, everyone out there in podcast land, and welcome to episode 1, because the last one was episode 0 of Grey 17, our new podcast reviewing every single episode of Babylon 5. So we are here for season 1, which is Signs and Portents, episode 1, Midnight on the Firing Line. If you haven't listened to episode 0, you should have. But if you haven't, just to give you a little rundown, what we're going to do here today is we have two groups of people on this podcast. We have our newbies and we have our fans. The newbies are watching this for the first time. And so we're going to spend the first part of the show talking to them and getting their feedback because they've only watched 2 episodes so far, The Gathering and Midnight on the Firing Line. And then we're going to kick those guys out and then answer all the questions that they have when they can't listen to it. It's going to be amazing. So we're going to spend that time beyond the rim talking about the show in its entirety and how Midnight on the Firing Line feeds into the next 5 years of shows. So I'm Scott, and with me is...
I'm Blake.
I'm Emily.
I'm Justin.
I'm Jessi.
I'm Andrew.
I'm John.
I'm Nicole.
I'm Mike.
And you heard a new one there. John Keneally was not with us on episode 0. So let's go ahead and have you introduce yourself. And basically, the 2 questions I have for you are, who are you and what do you want?
Okay, so 2 existential questions right out of the gate. All right, thanks, Scott. Who am I? Well, as I said, my name is John Keneally. I am currently a software engineer in the suburbs of Chicago. Lifelong comic book fan, sci-fi fan. Surprisingly enough, did not catch this show. Usually when I say sci-fi, though, it's kind of the Star Wars, some of the bigger ones. Not a lot of television, but big comic book guy. So this name, Straczynski, was pretty familiar to me. I'd seen him, read a bunch of his stuff before. And what do I want? I don't know. Anything, all of it, none of it. I mean, I've answers to some of the questions after watching these 2 installments of what you've made me watch. I don't know.
Are you questioning life choices yet?
It's weird when I've known you guys for a while now, and it seems like every time I get together with you guys, I have that same questioning about my life choices. And I think, what am I doing? What have I done? Who have I cursed to get here? But
excellent. That's what I like to hear. So I'm going to go ahead and dive a little bit into episode 1 and how we got to this point between the pilot movie and here, and then we're just going to start talking about it. So episode 0, which we talked about last week, The Gathering, was a 2-hour pilot that was greenlit by the new Primetime Entertainment Network, which was run by Warner Brothers. Originally, J. Michael Straczynski, who we'll call JMS, was told, if you can get in on time and on budget, you're greenlit for the series. So he built the pilot. It was on time and it was on budget. And then Warner Brothers said, well, now that we got a pilot, we want to test it first. So we're going to do some focus testing and have some people watch it. They did that. That took several months. And actually the feedback they got from the focus was mostly positive. A lot of the feedback they got actually is the same kind of stuff we talked about here. It's a little grainy. It's a little smoky. And I don't know what the heck's going on. But for the most part, it was positive. JMS is like, okay, great. So we're going to series, right? Now that we got the pilot and we got the focus groups, let's go ahead and show it on PTEN. But we've already got our other shows that have started. So we're not going to have an opening to show your show for another 3 months. So let's go ahead and drop it in 3 months and see what happens. And as Blake had mentioned last week, during this time, JMS is talking to his fan base on the internet, and he's one of the first guys using Usenets and all of that to get people interested. So he is trying to rally the troops, going to comic book conventions, rallying the troops to make sure that when this thing drops, it's going to get watched. And it does. And it was the biggest premiere that PTN at the time had. The pilot outranked any of the currently established shows. For those playing the home game, Time Tracks and Kung Fu, the legend continues. Then Warner Brothers came back and said, we're still going to wait a little bit to greenlight you. And finally, about 3 to 4 months after the pilot aired, they finally got the go-ahead to go to series. So that is why it took over a year between The Gathering and then Midnight on the Firing Line to come out. So now we are in the series proper. And because it took a year, some of our characters that we learned to love, I'm looking at Jessi giving me the little eye right now, did not join us for episode 1. So we had 3 characters that left us. Lita Alexander, the telepath, Laurel Takashima, and then Dr. Ben, as we've coined him, left as well for different reasons. The doctor actor was actually ill during the filming of The Gathering, and his illness continued, unfortunately. So he was not able to continue on the series. The actress for Lita Alexander, there's a couple different things that happened there, but basically there was contract disputes and Warner Brothers didn't want to pay her. And the same thing for Laurel Takashima. She definitely, she was the one with the most notes from the studio, as we discussed last week as well, too. And unfortunately, they decided to go a different way. And so in turn, half the group is shaking their heads, which I love the fact that your favorite character from The Gathering is no longer here. In response to that, we got 3 new characters, which I'm sure we'll talk about today. We haven't seen our new doctor yet. He is in the credits, but he has not shown up yet. But we also have Susan Ivanova, new second in command. And then we also have a new character, which is Stephen First's Veer, who is the entire attaché to Londo. That's where we're at now. And let's go ahead and dive into the first part of season 1 proper. And I want to go to Jessi first because she told me she was going to quit if Laurel was gone. And so tell me about Susan Ivanova, Jessi.
I wish you could have seen my face when I realized what was happening. Because, the credits at the beginning and it's got, whatever her name is as lieutenant commander. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, not only did they not kill her off, they just never brought her back. So yeah, I'm flipping TVs and tables and whatnot, but not only did they not bring her back, but they replaced her with the most obnoxious person in the world. Like, I absolutely cannot stand Ivanova. And listen, maybe she grows on me, but the jokes about, she's got weight jokes, she's got all kinds of things in there that just pushed all of my buttons. And I'm just like, watching the show is like, I could just quit. I could just not watch it anymore and just bow out now. But yeah, I was not a happy camper today.
It's interesting, and I will not go into too many details because you've only seen Claudia Christian play Ivanova once, but sure. I will say, because this is, it's been 30 years, I would argue she's probably one of the most popular characters of the show.
Okay.
So it's interesting that you hate her. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. It
could be because I liked Takashima so much. Yeah. And I liked her character, and I liked how she was, I liked the way that she played it. And so I guess I'm joking about, if she dies, I quit. But the caveat is I didn't say if she wasn't brought back, I would quit. But I guess just because I had liked the way that she played it, the one today just was like, I just was going into it with a bad taste. So
there are 2 parts there that I was surprised to hear. So the first was that you liked Takashima.
I did.
And then the second was that Ivanova is like a likable character, because I literally wrote down, why does the lieutenant commander have to be an unlikable female character?
Right.
Either one of them. I thought they were both just one note, like I'm the angry, I've made it this far, I'm lieutenant commander. One note, like, don't cross me. And I thought,
he's dealing with 15 different things, all of which are annoying. So you have to just deal with that.
yeah.
And that's, and that was the beginning, is like, so I don't know how I feel about the telepath either, but she's talking about how annoyed she is. And then she's talking about, well, I think you need a strong chin to be, a good leader. And his vice president has many chins. It's like, seriously, like, I don't know what angle we're going for, but you've already checked off my, I don't care for you list.
Yeah, I was on the pro Takashima bandwagon as well. I really liked the character a lot, and I kind of had the same, like, where did this wooden puppet come from in terms of Ivanova? Like, I don't know, she just rubbed me the wrong way, and just the way she spoke was like grating my fingers with a cheese grater. I couldn't get a hold of her at all. And then just some of the things she would say, like, okay, I get the story of why she doesn't like telepaths. Okay, that's, completely makes sense and is understandable. But just the rest of her, I'm like, no. Why?
This is why I started this show. Honestly, God, and Blake and I have been talking about doing this show for probably 2 years now. Is I have watched this show so much, I know what happens, and I could recite this show to you in my from memory. So I love seeing this with new eyes. And for the first time in literally my adult life, seeing you guys react to these characters for the first time, I am a kid in a candy store, and the fact that you don't like Ivanova, and I'm sure you don't like other people, and it's amazing. I love this.
Am I the only one who didn't like Takashima?
No, I didn't like her either.
Yeah,
I think so.
A lot of people on this cast did enjoy her. Again, I come at this with a very biased lens, because I know that she left after the pilot. So I've never really put time into her because she's not there. And I will be the first to say, Ivanova is one of my favorite characters too. I think she is one of the favorites in the fan base, I think. And Blake and Mike, if I'm wrong on this, tell me, but I think that she is. I hope she grows on you, because as I told Emily, it's Ivanova's world. We're just living in it.
And some of the bit I think to keep in mind too, especially with this first episode, as we jump into the series proper, when the Laurel Takashima character left, there was a plan for that character. There was a very set path for who that character was and what her role in all of this was to be. All of that role got kind of quickly rewritten, and various parts of it dropped into different characters in the series now. Mm-hmm. And I think a little bit of the rocky start with Ivanova, especially as I'm rewatching it this time a little more critically, because like Scott, I can recite this show inside and out, and I know where it goes. But watching, I think there was a little bit of a rocky start with how they introduced some of these characters, just as the nature of, you had this set thing and now you're kind of rebooting that in such a quick turnaround.
I just guess I wait for a whole metric ton of character development.
Right. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, if this is a fan favorite, I've just pissed off, like, can I say piss? I've pissed off everybody. I pissed off everybody that is now listening to the show, that's seen the show. So, I mean, hopefully she grows on me. Maybe she doesn't, and I hate her the whole time, and that's fine too.
Very well. Yeah, every character is different. I think that's the sign of a good show too, is you can latch onto some characters and some characters don't. If all the characters are bland and you don't care, then you're not going to like the show. The one thing I was going to say is to Blake's point, and this is really for the fan people who may be watching this and you are listening to this and you have just started with us on episode 1. Episode 0, we did go into the Laurel character arc and what was meant to be. And we also talked about whom many characters picked up that arc. And we'll talk probably a little bit more of that when we go beyond the rim on this one too, when we kick out our newbies. So we definitely do go into more spoiler territory, just not with our new folks. So stick with us if you want to hear spoilers. New folks can't. They've been told they may not.
If I can add one more thing about this, I think Blake raised a good point. I think maybe her introduction wasn't the best, because I feel like she just had this like RBF, chip on my shoulder attitude. And I thought she sucked. I mean, hopefully she gets better. I was like, I almost felt like she was trying too hard. You know what I mean? Like, I understand that you want to be an assertive, you know, in your role. And obviously, like, kind of like what John said about why is that unlikable female? I also felt that too. I was like, maybe it was just the way that she was introduced that was poor, because honestly, I was like, man, straight up sucks. Like, I just want to punch her in her face like Jakar. Like, she really just rubbed me the wrong way as well. But also maybe it was because like they could have done a better job with that, you know? So I'll give her a chance, but I'm a Takashima stan. I'm gonna say it right now. I'll always love her. And I don't know if I'll ever like her more than, you know, her, but I feel like they just introduced her really poorly. But I also got to say, Jessi, you said you weren't sure about Talia Winters. I actually really liked her off the bat. I don't know what it was about her. Something about her. I was like, I like her. I don't know. Like, I just felt like an instant, like kind of what you said, Scott, like, almost like a connection to a character. Like, something about her, I really, really liked her.
I couldn't figure out if the telepath was like trying to hit on, Lieutenant Commander or not. Like I couldn't figure out, like I felt like it at first, and I thought that maybe that's why she was being rude to her, but then it went a whole different path, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't know why I thought that. But
and I also wonder, is Veer like on drugs, or why is he so jumpy and like so crazy? Like he was just like so frantic.
Have you ever watched Animal House?
Yeah.
Okay, Stephen First. That's Stephen First.
Oh my God, I didn't even get that.
He's Flounder from Animal House. He's the exact same character.
That makes 100% sense now why he is the way he is.
And there was a panel discussion that he was talking about his audition for the role, and he got soap in his eyes before going into the audition, and he was stumbling around in the audition, and JMS and a couple of the other execs looked at him and said, Veer, that's it, you're Veer. Because he went in there trying to get the soap out of his eyes and was blundering around, and they're like, perfect, you got it.
That's actually a good point too. You know, one of the things I just finished JMS's autobiography, which Becoming Superman. It's a really good one. Anyone not a newbie on this podcast should check it out. But he actually said one of his things that he's really happy he did when he was making the show, both The Gathering and then here, is because he had no experience casting a show. He didn't go in looking at people's resumes. He just did what Blake just said, and he's like, okay, they walked in the door and they looked like the guy in my head, so they got the role. And that's how we got this cast.
Also, his hair was much less bozo than Lando's.
Well, and Lando's hair changed too. They changed the makeup on Lando.
Oh, that was one thing I wanted to point out. They all looked completely different. All of them, even even the commander, Sinclair. I was like, wait a second. Delenn looked different. Jakar looked different.
A lot different.
They all looked completely different. I'm like, what is happening right now? Is this all the same people? But when they spoke, I heard their voices, and I'm like, oh, okay, it is the same people. But boy, they sure look different.
We definitely got some, we did have a lot of changes because, again, it's been a year. So, and they also got a little bit more of a budget per episode. So we got new uniforms, which I love the new uniforms with the leather breaking instead of just like the full, just gray or blue. I think those are good. And we did get more makeup changes as well, too. Jakar's radically changed. The hairdo on the Minbari changed, and Delenn changed the most. And Blake, I think you have some stuff you want to say about Delenn too.
Yeah, so Delenn, and I was curious to see how many people picked up on some of the changes there. I mean, obviously the visual, and I won't go too far into the spoiler territory. We'll get there later. But
yes,
originally Delenn was supposed to be a male character that would, over the course of an arc, become female. And so that's why the makeup in The Gathering was much more masculine looking. And what ended up judging that, Mira Furlan, her voice, she could not get her voice deep enough to pass that off. So that was one of the very early story arcs that was planned to be in here.
Yeah, they actually even tried to, it was the 90s, so it wasn't really auto-tuned, but they even tried to auto-tune Mira Furlong's voice for The Gathering, and it just did not work. So they went with her normal voice.
One of the questions, and I don't know if it's a good time to do it, but so obviously Nicole pointed out, and we just talked about it definitely felt like they got the glow up, as the kids like to say now. And when the series started, everything was fresh and cool and whatever. So I'm curious, when I watched The Gathering, is it Delenn? Is that how you say it?
Delenn. Mm-hmm.
Delenn. So I wrote down and was like, ooh, I don't know what it is about her, but I don't trust her. And she had a line or something about, oh, I'm just supposed to observe. There was something there, and I thought, well, that's weird, but I'm going to take note of that. And so when it got to series, and I don't know if this is something maybe is a question we'll have or we'll go, you mentioned arcs changing and stuff. Is that, how much of that should we kind of remember? And we've got two installments I've watched. And that's one I took away. I thought, I don't know how much things have changed now that we're a series.
Well, and I think what Blake just dropped changed. So that's why when we drop stuff like that you have not seen yet, it's because you're not going to see it. So the transition gender-wise does not happen in this show. And they changed that after the gathering.
And the big thing, we talked about this some last time also, and I think we did more on the Beyond the Rim portion, but there's actually two versions of the gathering they did. There's the original one that aired, and then what was it, 4 years later, 5 years later?
93 and 1998. So yeah, 5 years later.
They redid it. And one of the things they did when they redid it was they added some dialogue and recut a few scenes in it to make it align more with what happened in the series with the overall arc. But the other piece with that is even within this first episode of the series proper, there's bits and pieces of the arc to come, but you could also watch it as a standalone episode. And there's actually several like that through the series. There's going to be little pieces dropped as we go along, especially through this first season, that get into what is going to be the bigger arching themes. And it starts to speed up pretty fast around the middle, but there's going to be little pieces in these first handful of episodes that go into the arc, but you can also watch them as standalone stories.
This is a novel. Yes, we are watching a TV show, but it has been mapped out mostly. Things are going to change. Actors leave. Studios have notes, all of that. But really, when it comes down to it, this has been mapped out. What gets dropped in episode 1, season 1 could pay off years from now. So I would recommend, especially with this show, and my dog is freaking out, but I would recommend that you pay attention to a lot that's in here because a lot of it pays off. And this is one of the reasons why I love this show the most is because things pay off. I won't say there are no filler episodes because there are filler episodes and many of them are in season 1. There's going to be little stuff in the filler episode that's going to make no sense to you now, but it will pay off. And so I would definitely be paying attention.
Is any of the sexual innuendo going to pay off? Because that was another thing that leapt out at me on this installment. I thought, boy, it's a little weird. It's a little interesting there in space, huh?
Why? Whatever are you referring to?
Mike, I do believe you coined the phrase, and let's. What's your phrase?
Nope, not gonna say it.
Oh, come on. Narn core is what Mike came up with. Narn core, and I think we're gonna have some Narn core throughout this show.
Not as bad as the first episode, but yeah.
I will say,
Garibaldi was laying it down. He was trying to get that Talia lady. He was like, "What up, girl?" I wrote that in my notes.
It's not his first favorite thing; it's his second favorite thing.
Did we ever find out what his first favorite thing was?
Things that get dropped in episode 1. Come back later. I don't know.
Was it popcorn?
There's a lot of things that happen, and I say this, and the fanboys are gonna giggle at this. There's a lot of things that happen in Garibaldi's room that we're gonna find out about.
So Garibaldi's a pimp, is what you're saying?
Oh, I get.
Garibaldi is the everyman character. For those DS9 fans, Garibaldi is your Miles O'Brien. He is the everyman.
Well, finding out what happens is I wrote down, is Babylon 5 a floating UN/Las Vegas? Because I'm not understanding what's happening.
Well, I think that's a good question. I think it really is. I mean, what they tell you in the intro is it is a 5-mile long station that holds 250,000 people. And really it is set up there to be basically Casablanca in space, a meeting place for everybody, but also we see this now in big cities. When you have a big city, people get to the big city and hope for the best, and then they get stuck. Other people use it as a port of call. And so it's a tourist attraction for some people. And that's why we have casinos. I mean, it's a big floating city. Absolutely it is. And it's blown up 4 times before. So they got that going for them too.
Well, I thought they didn't know what happened to the 4th one.
All right. Yeah. The 3 of them blew up. The 4th one, we don't know what happened to.
Yeah.
I took that as a,
Did you put that in your notes?
That's what I had in my notes from last week. I wrote yet ...
Yeah.
What happened to Babylon 4? ?
Freddy Foreshadow came out, and I was like, oh, great. Subtle. This show's going to be awesome.
Chekhov's space station. We don't have a gun. We got a space station.
I love that. John said something that kind of made me think too about, is this like UN in Las Vegas kind of thing?
Far and away, my favorite scene. It made me pause and laugh out loud so hard when he goes, "Can I get a second?" They pan over to the Rogues Gallery. Not a sound is made. And the saddest little man over here just like, yeah. And they go, "All right, second." And I thought, who are these people now?
Yeah, that's the thing too. So that's what I was going to get at is the makeup of this is kind of weird. So we have the 5 main, and they were called the 5 federations in the pilot. So we got the Narn, the Minbari, the Vorlon, the humans, Centauri. But then we have the new one this time is the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, which is all the little peons. But I guess they all get individualized motions in seconds, which also doesn't make sense to me. If you're
not
the
all
League
of
of
them.
Non-Aligned Worlds.
Because I paused it, and there is no Monkey Man bartender represented anywhere in the League of Non-Aligned, whatever you said it was.
We talked about Laurel and Lita and the Doctor, but we lost Monkey Man.
Yeah, do not tell me that Monkey Man's contract was not renewed.
We also lost the puppet guy on the train. We haven't seen the train yet, but on spoilers, the puppet guy is gone. I'm sorry.
Also, we're supposed to believe in all of the vastness that is the galaxy. They basically boiled it down to 5 different people, and then everyone else is in other.
Yeah, I will say that comes up. And what I mentioned on the Gatherings episode is one of the big influences into this is Isaac Asimov's Foundation. And if you've read Foundation, well, for one, there's no alien. Well, there are aliens later on, but really there's not supposed to be for a while. But there is a lot. There's a couple major civilizations, and then there's everybody else. And I think that's gonna be a plot point moving forward.
That's gotta feel bad for those guys, doesn't it? Like,
yeah, but
I get to sit in the big table. Oh, have you invented air fryers yet?
I did kind of mention this though too last week too. One of the reasons why I like this show is because the civilizations aren't all equal for the most part. And again, I love Star Trek. Don't hate me, but for the most part in Star Trek, and yes, Emily, I know the Vulcans are more advanced. You yelled at me last time, but Klingons, Romulans, Cardassians, humans, they're all basically at the same playing field. They've all got the same tech for the most part. They all, if one ship goes against another ship, they're going to be kind of equal. Whereas in B5, we know just looking at their ships, the Vorlon and the Minbari are well ahead. We know the Narn are new to the scene. They were slaves of the Centauri before this. We know the Centauri are actually a race that are kind of on the way out. So there are different levels here. And so the League of Non-Aligned Worlds of those guys who are, we got spaceships, but what?
And looking at kind of in the UN terms, and we'll see this come to play a little bit more, and this is not a major spoiler, but the 5 major powers make up more of an advisory committee, which could almost be the UN Security Council. Mm-hmm. Versus then you've got the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, which are all of your other smaller nations that, show up in the Olympics for the participation ribbon and
Madagascar,
that type of stuff. Yay. So, you've got kind of the smaller worlds that are out there doing their thing, but they're represented in that body. So I think that's kind of what you'll see develop on that structure as we go through.
Well, I don't know if we talked about this last episode, but Scott, you just gave us a little hierarchy, right? Who's advanced, who's not. This Earth Alliance, as I'll use air quotes, because I thought, well, that to me implies multiple. And what I got out of that is what, Earth and Mars? Does that make up the entirety of the alliance?
There's more to the Earth Alliance, and we'll get to that as we go through the series, but there's several other colonies that I don't want to get into because that will get into some spoiler territory. But the first Earth colony was Mars, and that's what they covered through here. But there is more to the Earth Alliance than Earth and Mars. But
I think it is fair to say, and what we've seen so far is obviously Earth is the big dog, and Mars is second big dog.
Mm-hmm. And one of my kind of just watching this, especially in this episode, some kind of takeaways from kind of that whole political situation. Randomly threw a presidential election into the mix. Shocker. Politics on Earth seem like they're kind of a mess. And one of the questions kind of that I have is, how much do Santiago and or Crane play into the overall story? Are they there has to be a reason why they just randomly threw a presidential election into this episode.
And a vice president with many chins.
And a vice president with many chins, which I hope to maybe see multi-chin vice president eventually. But I kind of just, and again, very early on, I've got this bad feeling in the pit of my stomach that maybe Earth Alliance might be kind of bad guys. Yeah, I mean, think about how their horrible treatment of telepaths. Oh, if they find out that you're psychic, you can either join us and work for the government, you can go to prison, or we're going to give you a chemical lobotomy, essentially. I don't know. I just got this creepy feeling about the Earth Alliance as a whole.
I would say, and Blake hit on this last week too, is unlike, again, Star Trek, this is not your utopian future. So, I mean, the human race doesn't have a great track record when it comes to mental health. So having telepaths have to be either, segregated or muddled, makes sense based on who we are, unfortunately. But I hear what you're saying too. But the one thing I will throw out there is, for the most part, it looks like the Earth Alliance is the one flipping the bill for B5. So at least they're, trying to do that. And as we already know, one of the reasons why they're doing that is because 10 years ago, we almost got stomped in the face by the Minbari. So there's a reason why they're doing that.
But then you have that eternal hypocrisy of trying to be diplomatic and isolationist at the same time.
Very true. I mean, welcome to the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Earth Alliance really is a parallel to the United States, I would say. If you follow through, I mean, there's the different nations they mentioned within the Earth Alliance at various points. But I think if you kind of watch the arc and the pattern, it really is representative.
And again,
one last thing I'll say, right, to just along those lines, is just kind of my own mentality and kind of how things have changed since this came out. During that scene where Sinclair is giving Jakar kind of the business, I'll say, and he mentions we have our own history of sneak attacks. We have Pearl Harbor. We have the nuking of San Diego. We have the destruction of the Mars colony. And I'm like, why didn't he mention September 11th? And then I was like, oh, that's why. Duh. Okay, Justin. This was like 10 years before.
Yeah. No. But I do appreciate that, because a lot of sci-fi, when they try to do the contemporary stuff for the audience, they usually list off stuff that we already know about. But I do appreciate that they list off one we knew about, Pearl Harbor, but the rest is also canon
stuff
now.
That's yet to come.
Yeah,
stuff to look forward to.
San Diego gets nuked. I mean, I don't like the Padres either, but I mean, geez.
I just did want to point out kind of an interesting observation that I had, which is, you talked about it just a minute ago, where we know from the last episode that the Minbari and the humans in Earth have fought, and that the Minbari essentially, it's spelled out that they could have wiped us out if they wanted to, and they chose of their own volition not to. What I kind of found interesting about that now is, it seems, as you said, that the humans are the ones who are footing the bill for the Babylon project, not one time, but 5 times. And simultaneously, I thought it was kind of interesting that in the previous episode, you have Londo describing that the Centauri have kind of latched on to Earth because they are the sharks in the galaxy now. And so it kind of makes me wonder along those same lines of what about Earth? What is going on with Earth that makes them seem to be the new dominant rising force, in the universe? Whereas we obviously know that that's not where they were not that long ago.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, obviously, and we haven't even talked about these guys yet, and I know why. It's because we had some new characters we had to hit on too. But this is very much a Jakar and Londo show, this episode. And we learn a lot about the Narn and Centauri. Mike, you just mentioned some of it with the Centauri latching on, but we also learned that the Narn sold weapons to the Earth forces during the war. They also sold weapons to everybody, as Sinclair points out, but the Narn were involved in that case. So, I mean, there's a lot of backstory there that we're just kind of getting through. And I think that's one of the other things too with this show is, again, being the novel that it is. And I know I sound like I'm defending the show a lot, but it's because I like it. This is chapter 1. So you gotta put all your pieces on the board, and so we know what's going on. And so that's what we're kind of muddling through right now.
We also kind of gleaned from this episode that the Vorlon don't seem to have a particularly high opinion of either the Centauri or the Narn.
It's funny that you say that, Mike, because I wrote that down. I was thinking about it when Kosh said there are dying people and they should let them pass. Who was he talking about? Because he didn't specify.
He said both.
Sinclair said who, and he said yes. And I was like, does that mean both? Like, or, it wasn't clear to me.
It's kind of interesting because, I mean, to me, the way I read that is we have already, Londo described his own people, the Centauri, as being on the decline. We've very much gotten that impression that they're no longer the top dog. There's a reiteration of that fact in this episode when Londo and Garibaldi talk, and they go through that whole spiel about, when the Centauri introduced themselves, they told us they ran everything, and turns out that was like 100 years ago, and you guys are full of crap. But then I kind of thought that was interesting because now we have the Narn, who are recently free of the Centauri, who seem to be really gung-ho about building themselves up to be a new force to be reckoned with, primarily so they can go seek revenge, it seems. But looking at that, then, Kosh kind of says, like, yeah, you don't need to worry about those guys because they're not going anywhere.
Well, and Garibaldi seems to have his own kind of loss and revenge story that I'm kind of eager to.
Yeah, we haven't got to yet.
When he says to him, "You have no idea," how much I've lost, or something to that effect. But I can't wait. I mean, the Valoran, I think right now is the most intriguing race to me so far. I think it's just because we don't really know anything about them. I think in this episode, we kind of maybe got a glimmer that they're a spectral light type being, which makes me happy because one of my big complaints from a lot of 70s, 80s, and 90s science fiction is how is everybody also humanoid? Well, now we have this race that probably isn't humanoid, but we still don't know exactly what they are. So I'm excited to see.
They're rock'em sock'em robots is what they are.
Yeah, pretty much.
I wonder if I'm the only one. I actually really
Johnny 5.
The Centauri. I got a real British vibe from them, right? So they used to be dope, and then they've kind of lost what used to be their little imperial get up, and they've got the robes and stuff. I was a huge Londo guy. I was like, man, these guys, I'm digging it. Everything they're doing. I really appreciate that. But I kind of want to talk about this like Psy-Corps more because so that was one thing. It didn't really play a whole lot in the episode until kind of the end. But it played two huge parts that I thought, okay, I hope they dive way more into this. The first was, what are these other governments that they would allow this, right? So in the first one, they're like, oh yeah, our race, the Narn, we don't have that. We'd like to get it, obviously, because in my head, I'm going, this is the biggest espionage tool you have to unleash on the whole galaxy. So why would these other alien races go, oh, that's cool. You got those guys? Yeah, that's fine. Sit in on these business deals and screw it up for me, or be a part of these trade negotiations and screw it up for me. So I had no idea why they would even allow, the Earth Alliance to even have that. Because it was funny when they talk about, oh, you're not supposed to, you can't read someone, you can't do this, you can't do that. And literally it turns on my boy Londo because she just, kind of mind rapes him and just like, oh, well, I saw what you're about to do and I'm immediately going to go tattle on you. So first of all, what's up? Snitches get stitches. But second of all, I thought, man, that's not really living up to your whole like code or rules or whatever you got going on. And then this is kind of a minor question. What's she wearing gloves for? I took the gloves to be kind of a rogue kind of thing. Like, oh, I can read you if I take my glove off, but she had the gloves on and I don't know. But I thought the Psy-Corps thing, I hope they really dive into that more.
That's the thing, though, isn't it? It didn't in the first, in the pilot, didn't she have to take her gloves off to?
She got a better read.
Yeah, there it is. So.
Yeah, I think what we've learned from the gloves so far is that they really, and we're going back to what we know about the Psy-Corps now, that if you don't follow their rules, they're going to basically neuter you. And the gloves are the same idea. They're basically a shackle holding you back from what you could be doing.
But thinking about that, she even said when she was talking about normally she can't do that, but like something with how powerful that Londo's intentions were, like she's trained not to be able to perceive what she perceived, and something broke through. So maybe we'll see something more with her and that kind of I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm doing it, and repercussions, and who knows.
Well, and the other thing we know.
Sorry,
go ahead, Jessi. No, go for it. No.
Wasn't that a consent issue too? Like, don't they have to have the consent of the person to read? And he was out. So I took that as being more of you have to have permission.
Yeah. Well, and we also know just from Lita and Talia now, and again, part of this is, behind the scenes, the Lita actor just didn't sign on. So a lot of it carried over, but they're both P5s. We don't know what that rating means yet. We just know they're both P5s. Is that really high? Is that mid-range? We don't know. So maybe a P5 isn't supposed to do that, but maybe somebody else can, or vice versa. We don't know yet.
That whole psych war thing kind of reminds me of the I don't know, I keep getting it in my head, the Mutant Registration Act storyline from the Marvel universe keeps popping into my head.
So the commander then, is Babylon supposed to be neutral? Is he a commander for like the Earth Alliance army? Is he an ambassador? Because everyone else is referred to as like ambassador. I'm still trying to figure out like this hierarchy of who, because he'll talk to a senator and be like, I don't know, kind of not flippant, but it's not like a military, like give me your orders. It very much seemed on hand. Because, the senator was like, hey, by the way, we talked about it. The subcommittee said you should vote abstention. And then he was like, as soon as it was over, he goes, oh, well, we're not doing that. I'm gonna do whatever I want, which was also, I thought his attitude changed from the first to the second installment. I thought not only did he get a new haircut, but he got a new outlook on life, it seemed like. But so trying to figure out that hierarchy of everything so far has probably been the biggest questions I've had.
Well, I think one thing, and I'm going to take Scott's favorite line here, is the commander's role and why the commander is on that station will be explained, and we are not going to tell you for probably about a year.
But I will say the one thing we have seen going to what you're, and this is actually because I mentioned this in the Gathering episode, is JMS was very much on the Usenets and a lot of different places. And because I'm a glutton for punishment, I've been reading all of his chats from the 1990s. And this is a question that people had from the Gathering. And so he answered it kind of before the show even started. So I don't think it's a spoiler. And that is yes, Babylon 5 is neutral territory. However, Earth Alliance is flipping the bill. Along with that, your commander is both the leader of the Earth Alliance on the station, but they are also the ambassador to the League and to the other worlds. That's why you have the lieutenant commander, who is really the one who is in ops more. So we don't see Sinclair in ops much. We see Ivanova there because she is basically running to make sure the trains are on time, whereas Sinclair is supposed to be the one making sure the station doesn't blow up, and also that we have seconds and motions and try to vote correctly.
He's also, though, an F around and find out type of person. Like he is the 90s version of come and get it if you want it type.
Yeah. And I think we talked a little bit about Michael O'Hare in the last episode. So all and actually, John, you don't. So I'll bring this up right now. Again, for those who may have not listened to the last episode, Michael O'Hare was going through a lot right now. The gentleman who played Sinclair, he was dealing with schizophrenia immensely, to where on set he was seeing people who were not there. He was hearing voices. But I think you can see a difference in his portrayal of Sinclair between The Gathering and Midnight here. I think he has become a stronger, more less aloof guy. And I think we're starting to see more of O'Hare's acting ability. I absolutely think we're seeing that. And I think I like that he is like he's the guy who can go and have a conversation with an ambassador. And also, we saw it with Jakar in this episode. He's talking to Jakar, and he basically says to Jakar, if I'm going to mess you guys up if you don't stop this crap. Oh, and by the way, have a nice day, Ambassador. Enjoy yourself.
You also jump into a just really rad CGI space battle that really just blew me away. As a software engineer and someone who's done some design work in the digital space, boy, I tell you, that was neat.
We kind of mentioned the Star Furies last week, but we didn't have them yet, and Mike has them as his background. We've now seen the Star Furies, and this is what Blake alluded to as well in the last episode, that these things were built around physics. So NASA had a part in this, and NASA has used some of that work that came out of this for later on. I mean, these things are beefy little ships that are, I love the fact that, every time they make a move, you see a jet of air, and they're actually, using the physics. I like these ships a lot, but yes, the CGI,
Honestly, I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it because the visual and the music. I was watching this and I'm like, I feel like I'm playing Star Fox right now.
Do a barrel roll.
I was going to say
if you want the upgraded version of this, guys, doing a little bit deeper dive on the production, and the graphics engineer who actually worked on B5 and did a lot of the Starfleet programming later worked on Battlestar Galactica, the 04 reimagining. And if you watch some of the Cylon Raiders fly, they're using the same physics principles as the Star Furies from B5 because they literally use the same program.
Mm-hmm.
Updated software, updated hardware, but it's the same program and the same parameters for the flight models in that show. And you'll even see in this show, the one where it did fired the thrusters and spun around, you'll see a Cylon Raider do that a few times in Galactica.
Well, and the Vipers do that too.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. No, go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say, I love how Sinclair was just like, I'm gonna go handle this business. And he jumps in the ship, goes, leads the crew, and then he comes back and drops a dime on Jakar, like, I know what's up. I just handle this. Like, he kind of is a badass. Like Jessi said, after I find out, like, he is one of those dudes that's like, I can be a diplomat, but I can hand you your ass if I need to, and I love that.
That is definitely a sci-fi television trope. It's the same idea with, Kirk. The captain probably shouldn't be putting themselves in danger as much as these guys do, but there are main protagonists. So when there's a ship to jump into, let's go.
They're a leader too. I mean, 9 times out of 10, a leader is going to do those. That, like, you're just a stronger personality if you're.
Yeah.
How many times has Spock told Kirk not to go on the away mission?
But in this case, he straight up. But in this case, he straight up did it to avoid having to go do what he didn't want to do.
Yeah,
he was like, "All right, Ivanova, you got this. Peace."
Well, but
I also. Oh, go ahead.
You didn't see me.
Who hasn't wanted to avoid a meeting they didn't want to go to?
Yeah. I mean, I'd go fight space pirates too.
I do like the connection there between both Londo and Sinclair. Both of them got messages from their homeworld they did not like, and both of them did the same thing. We're just going to ignore it. We're going to say we didn't get that message. It was garbled in communication. Sorry. So I think that also shows us a little bit about these guys too, is because they're off on their own on this, space station, they can kind of play it like the Wild West sometimes.
There are a couple of themes that I noticed. So when Jakar was talking about, right, it used to be ours, or now it's theirs. Now we're going to take it back. And I was, again, I kind of thought the Centauri gave me a real UK vibe. And so that imperialistic kind of like theme that was there that used to be running, there was one little message that I thought I heard on the newscast. It got me thinking about nativism, and it really got me thinking about like current events. I think it was they said the president, I think what he ran on or something was more about like Earth centric or less Mars. I got a real make Earth great again kind of vibe from it. I can't remember the exact line. But I thought, ooh, that'll be interesting to see if they dive in more to that, or how that starts getting, into kind of the politics that you talk about, or that we see, and how that goes and moving forward.
Let's go ahead and start wrapping up our newbie section. I want to hear if there's any other positives or negatives that we haven't hit on.
Okay, so every time Londo and Veer would have a scene together, all I could think is Veer reminds me of Rick Moranis for some reason, and it feels like a DS9 version of Spaceballs, and how can I take any of this seriously? Like, you guys are doing all this deep dive, which is great, but I'm watching it like... like, I just want to laugh. Like, it feels like Spaceballs, but DS9 version, and I'm confused and I can't focus.
I'm just sitting here smiling again at you guys seeing this for the first time, because I see Veer and it's so different than what you're seeing. And I get it. And I love this so much.
It's something, I think it's his facial expressions, and I think that's where it's coming from. But in that like weird overacting comedic relief part, I'm really struggling to take it seriously enough to do any sort of true analysis.
It's his overall body shape. He like tucks his head down between his shoulders and becomes like a ball.
Blake already talked about the casting, but absolutely Veer was brought in to bring in some lightheartedness, and that, Stephen First coming in and doing that, he's definitely comedic relief. Absolutely. For better or for worse.
I'll be honest, I wasn't really a big fan of Londa. I thought he was annoying. His voice gets a little grating after a while.
Well, and you mentioned his voice. Two things I wanted to mention about Londo and Jakar, because again, Mike, you said this too. They're your favorite characters, and they're mine too. We're in episode 1. Stick with us. But both of them, I love how they got like their character vibes. So, lingering questions. Anything else that you want Mike, Blake, and I to answer after we kick you all off the call?
Well, no, because I'm not going to get any answers to it.
Right, and then they just make fun of us afterwards. It's fine. Like, this is what's happening.
Thanks, guys.
You just can't listen to them.
What's going on? Again, what's this structure? What is this? How have they gotten the galaxy together and boiled it down to 5 distinct factions, one of which is the Earth Alliance got a little too much of the SS vibe there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple little things. I kind of found myself doing this, not on purpose, but I found a quote from the first one. But I really liked when Sinclair said sneak attack is the first resort of a coward. I feel like my thing is I'm going to look for a good quote from each show. So I think I'm going to keep that going. But I thought it was just a couple wrap up things that were unrelated or maybe we didn't touch on. I thought it was really adorable and wholesome how Garibaldi was watching cartoons and like explaining it to Delenn and eating popcorn with her. And she was kind of like, what is this? Looking at the popcorn. I thought that was just a wholesome, like sweet scene. It just made me really happy. And I will say, as much as Ivanova sucked, I did kind of feel a little bit of empathy when she was talking about her mom. And that gave us a little bit more info on the Psi Corps, which, I would just like more info on the Psi Corps.
Well, if anything's going to survive the 20th century and the nuking of San Diego, it might as well be Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century. It's quality. It's good.
I do have 2 questions that, again, I want the answers to, but I won't be able to get. So the first is, and I don't know if we talked about it in the last episode, I got to imagine they are, but are they really going to dive into that 24 hours or whatever he said, the commander, that gap he's got in his memory? Because it does seem like Delenn has the knowledge of that 24 hours, and it seems like it's going to be pretty important. And then the second is, you might be able to answer this one on here. The Centauris, is that hair, or do you think that's part of them? And if it's hair, what product do you think they use?
You know what? When you say it, when you ask, is that part of them? I get a chuckle, and I'm not going to say why. Just gonna. There's an episode coming up you're going to enjoy.
All right.
Oh boy.
Blake's like, yep.
I guess, John, it is hair, and I will say, as far as product, I live on the West Coast. It's possible. Just walk around the streets of Portland.
The only question I have, and I'll have to probably dive into research on my own someday, or if you guys know the answer and can talk about it now, who people, or were there any people or anybody from Babylon 5 who worked on the Mass Effect video game series? There seems to be a lot of parallels.
As a Mass Effect fanboy who is desperately waiting for Mass Effect 4 to come out in another 5 years. We could do an entire episode, Justin, on the connections between Mass Effect and Babylon 5 and we would spoil the crap out of Mass Effect and Babylon 5. And I'll just admit that I don't know if any of them worked on it, but the
inspiration's there.
The people who wrote Mass Effect, all 3 of the original Mass Effects, absolutely were fans of B5, and I will just leave it at that for now, and we can talk about it in 5 years.
Gotcha.
I just thought of another question. Should we just call it B5? Is that like what the cool kids say instead of Babylon 5?
DS9, B5, TNG.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I have one more question. I did notice that there was that real big rivalry and tension and revenge between Londo and Jakar. So I guess my question that I can't get the answer to is this going to be a recurring theme throughout the whole series, or is it going to kind of die down, or are we just going to see it escalate, is kind of what my other question was.
I did say the name of this season, which is basically book 1 of the show, is Signs and Portents, and I will leave it at that.
Can you just say which one's Viserys and which one is Littlefinger?
Oh, speaking of shows that completely fell apart in their last few seasons, yes. Okay, well, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up for our newbies. For those of you who are listening to us for the first time, this is the end of the main section of the show. We are going to go into credits now, but much like any MCU movie in the past 20 years, there is an after credits piece. So if you are a fan of the show, if you have watched the show before, or if you just don't care and you want to be spoiled the crap out of, stick around after credits, and Mike, Blake, and I are going to go beyond the rim and, again, frustrate the hell out of our newbies by answering every single question they asked, but they can't stick around and listen to it. Until next time, I have been Scott, and with me has been...
Blake.
Emily.
Justin.
Jessi.
Andrew.
John.
Nicole.
And Mike.
And next week, we will learn about the Soul Hunters. And if you thought this episode was weird, just wait. Thank you for listening to Grey 17, a Babylon 5 podcast. You can find all the places to listen to this podcast and links to our social media accounts at anchor.fm/Grey17podcast. We want to hear from you, so please join the discussion on Facebook and Twitter. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Grey 17 is a part of the Front Row Network and NPR Illinois Community Voices. You can find all the Front Row shows at thefrontrownetwork.com. Grey 17 is not affiliated with, and this podcast has not been prepared, approved, or licensed by Warner Brothers or any other owners of the Babylon 5 copyright. All audio clips included in this podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders. They are included here for the purpose of review, and no infringement is intended. The opening and closing theme was by Sakar Bala and is available from Bixabay.
And what's out there?
The rim,
And beyond that?
the truth.
Thanks for everybody sticking around for Beyond the Rim. If you are new to Babylon 5 and are wondering, much like John Keneally, what the heck you've signed up for, this is not where you should be. You should turn this off right now, because we're about ready to spoil the entire 5-season run, and then books, comics, spin-off shows, and what have you. For those of you who have watched the show before, we're going to dive into what our newbies asked about with Midnight on the Firing Line and get into some of the spoiler territory. So, guys, where do we want to start in terms of frustrating the hell out of our newbies?
I will say, for the record, I did not remember that the whole premonition about Jakar and Londo killing each other happened as early as episode 1.
This is one of those times where I don't think JMS had everything mapped out. He claims he did, but that'd be really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that he planned this part out, because this is why Jakar and Londo are my favorite characters, because we go from the arc, even in The Gathering, where they hate each other, and we find out more so why they hate each other throughout this next few seasons. And then they come to an understanding and almost a friendship, but then we know 20 years from now, they're still going to kill each other. We know why.
Yeah, we know why.
But yeah, they're still going to kill each other.
Well, I think that's one of the areas, and Mike, this has been one of your criticisms of Star Trek Discovery, is their inability to do these long season arcs. B5 did have these big arc pieces, but they still built them within stories that could be standalone, and they did such a better job of it with the way they structured it. I think the other piece, just kind of in big story arc, a lot of the frustration I'll touch on is, the frustration they had with Ivanova. Mm-hmm. We know more of Ivanova's backstory, the father that didn't approve of her being an Earth Gov, the fact that she's a latent telepath herself and is in fear of that being discovered.
Which is why she's hiding from Talia, and which we don't know that yet, but we will know that.
There are two things I almost said in the previous episode. One is I grow to really like the character of Ivanova in time. I will say her performance through most of this first episode was not great. It was very, very wooden. It was very poorly written. But by the time she delivers her kind of I don't know what character centric piece at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Her speech with Talia, all of that went away. It was a very well delivered, very emotional, like no more criticisms at that point. And I think as the episodes go on, hopefully the noobs will start to buy into her a little bit more. But I had to agree that I didn't like her portrayal at first either. And kind of related to that, I thought it was interesting. I almost want to know what version of the Gathering that Keneally watched.
Yeah.
Because I also did not like the character of Laurel. And I'm the only one of the group that I know of who recently watched the original. Was it the original or was no? It was the original.
Oh yeah, you watched the original, the '93 version. They edited her down a bunch, and they also redubbed her lines.
And so I didn't like her character because of the dubbed over, softened, more wooden tone. I thought she was a one-note character from beginning to end. I didn't understand everyone's attraction to her.
Thing also that came up that I'm really it was brought up by Justin in week 1, and it was brought up by John this week, is Earth Alliance. And I love the fact that these guys are starting to feel the ickiness of Earth Alliance so quickly. I mean, even John this week said they're like the SS. And well, we know that especially in seasons 2 and 3, we're definitely going to have that buildup of a fascist state. So I love that these guys are starting to see that, even though we're just getting started. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I know, one of the things, I think it was Nicole made the comment about Ivanova's comment about the vice presidential candidate having multiple chins. We know where President Santiago's vice president goes. We know what happens with President Clark once he becomes president of the Earth Alliance. This whole season, as you keep calling it, it signs importance. They're foreshadowing, even from this episode, what's going to happen and how that's going to play out.
Yeah, and I loved one of them said, I wonder if we're going to see this vice president. I'm like, yeah, you're going to see a little bit of him, especially when he murders his president.
I actually think it's interesting that they've latched onto that so firmly, because as you look at some of the other things that are being set up throughout the series, the monologue mentioning before, the Sinclair story about the hole in his mind, some of that stuff is very, 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 very on the nose. Whereas they've latched onto these, like, really, in my mind, super subtle detail mentions of the Earth Alliance, and they're applying pretty accurate meaning to a lot of it.
Well, I did love that, even when I mentioned, the 4 original Babylon stations blew up, one of them corrected me and said, well, one we don't know about. I'm like, yes, you're catching stuff. This is great. I love this. Wait until you get to Babylon Squared. It's going to be interesting. And I'll talk about this more when we do get to Night Watch and fascist Earth Alliance. But I think JMS obviously had this kind of planned out, this piece of it, and part of it is just from his background. And again, I'll talk more about it with the newbies as well too when we get there. But his father spent World War II in Poland, and he found out later in life, JMS found out later in life, that his father conspired with the Nazis as a child, to a point where very much conspired with the Nazis. So I think JMS very much has this in his background, and the ideas of how fascism can take effect is something that he's definitely building towards. But yeah, and also too, the B4 station and having that kind of come up again, that conversation, we're going to hear more about that, obviously. And then John mentioned it again too, with the hole in Sinclair's mind. So I'm looking forward to a couple different episodes that are going to be happening here in season 1, where, and this is the thing too, I think the ones who haven't really bought into this show yet, I'm hopeful that when we get to some of those episodes like Babylon Squared and the episode about the line, which I'm blanking on the name right now, both of which come up about midway through season 1, the light bulbs will start clicking, like, oh, they are starting to answer some of my questions. Excellent. And hopefully that will also get them more interested in the show too.
I think the other one that came up, and it was a conversation with Kosh, and I can't remember who mentioned it, but that when Kosh basically said they're a dying race, leave them, and Sinclair was which ones, and Kosh just answered yes. And I think that's, you look at the arc of the series, and once you know just who the Vorlons are and all of this, Kosh gave warnings throughout the series of ways to avoid what was coming, I think. And I think this might have been one of, let the Centauri fall and you could have avoided so many issues.
Mm-hmm. And we know that Kosh is not speaking for the Vorlons here. Kosh is actually a rogue Vorlon, for lack of a better term. And the Vorlons are not happy with everything that he's doing. And we're going to know after Kosh dies that the Vorlons are going to be much more normal to what they want, and that is that they just see all these civilizations as pawns on the board. And yeah, I think that's right. I think that Kosh is definitely trying to be someone who's helping the younger races along, and he becomes literally a father figure for Sheridan down the road too when Sheridan comes into this at the end of Civilization and season 4, that humans will ascend to be more Vorlon-like, but we also know that the Narns and Centauri will not. They will not move into that new age. And the guys hit on that too a little bit too, with the fact that this, and part of it is this is a human-centric show because, well, humans are writing it, so the humans are always going to be the protagonist to an extent. But I mean, Mike, you mentioned it too, but others as well, that other races are realizing that the Earth, the humans have more in play here, and obviously we know that at the end of the day, it's going to be the humans who are going to kind of break this cycle. Which again, I also love the fact that Justin brought up Mass Effect, and I can't make too many connections with Mass Effect because I don't know who's played it. But also, if you play Mass Effect all the way through to Mass Effect 3, they not only homage Babylon 5, they rip Babylon 5 off a lot. Well, and along with other works of literature, but there is definitely a lot of, races ascending and cycles and everything in Mass Effect that obviously came from Babylon 5.
Well, and the other part I'll go into with Justin and his questions around what makes the Earth Alliance such a big deal, and I think John touched on it too, was the pieces they don't know. The Minbari conflict wasn't the only Earth conflict. There was the Dilgar invasion that the Earth Alliance was involved in, that they really got into that in... It's mentioned in the series, but they talked more about it in the movie in the beginning.
Yes.
Which I'm assuming we'll get to at some point. If
we will. I think we're going to probably hit on. I think we're going to probably hit on that after season 4 because that's where it was published. So yeah. Yes.
And then the other part is, especially if you think about it from the perspective of these other races, that the Minbari stopped and surrendered to the Earth Alliance for no reasons, for unknown reasons to anybody else. So you look at how these other races are viewing the Earth Alliance, and typical human response to, hey, they surrendered, we won. Mm-hmm. That kind of gets into the Earth Alliance attitude, as well as the perception of the Earth Alliance throughout the galaxy. Yeah. In this universe of, they had the Dilgar invasion, which they were successful in, and then the Minbari surrendered to them at the Battle of the Line. They are the big thing in the galaxy right now.
Yeah, and we will hit the Dilgar a little bit with Deathwalker. Nowhere near as much as in the beginning, you're right. But I think the guys will hear a little bit about that in season 1 with Deathwalker. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and another thing you didn't mention right there too, and we will find out down the road, is Sheridan is the only member of a species who's taken out a Minbari warship in, the last century. So yeah, not only did they get the Minbari to surrender, but they also took out a warship. So that's a very good point.
Yeah, it is interesting that, it seems like Sinclair is the only one, or one of the only people who's bothered by the fact that the Minbari chose to not wipe them out, and the fact that, humanity didn't really win that conflict.
Well, but Sinclair is one of the few guys who actually saw what was happening, because if you were on the line, most of them were dead.
Probably didn't make it.
I mean, Sinclair was the one guy who's like, I was gonna
we didn't win
kamikaze a ship, and then I woke up and we won. And I was like, that doesn't make sense.
Well, and that gets into the question of, how does Sinclair get on the station? As we'll learn, Sinclair was on the list by the Minbari to be approved to be the station commander. They put him there. Mm-hmm. So they'll learn that along the way, but this all plays in. So those questions they have about how does this seemingly random commander get here and act as an ambassador for Earth? I thought that was interesting. They picked up on that question already, knowing we're going to get that answer.
Well, and we also had Delenn say, "I'm here to watch," because the Minbari want to see what Sinclair does. Absolutely.
Well, and it seems like the Minbari, that's kind of all they're doing right now, is they're sitting back and watching, because it's the humans that are running the show.
Well, and we also know that there's only two. The Narn kind of know, not really yet, but the two races that know the shadows are still out there and that they are coming back are the Minbari and the Vorlon. So the Minbari are, at least some of them, especially the religious caste, are planning for that. And so they're kind of assuming that's going to happen sooner or later, not in the next year, but they're assuming it's going to happen.
I also thought it was kind of interesting, and maybe, I thought it was interesting that you find out in this episode Sinclair's whole background is military. His whole family tree is fighter pilots and war heroes all the way up until he is in command of a station and is essentially a diplomat. Mm-hmm. And that's a tip off about something.
And he wasn't supposed to be. Yeah. I love Sheridan, so I'm looking forward to having him come up. But I also, what Blake, you just said too, with the fact that Sinclair was put there, we also learned down the line that Sheridan was not. The Minbari don't like Sheridan. So when he comes in, we also get that dichotomy too between Sinclair and Sheridan. I'm looking forward to Soul Hunter, just the fact that it is a weird ass episode, but also we get a lot of Delenn information. So I think that's going to be helpful to the newbies. And then
I think Soul Hunter, I'm with you. I think Soul Hunter is going to be interesting. They're going to have a lot of questions if they're observant, because the very last bit, when they refer to Delenn by title, that part, it'll be interesting to see if they pick up on that. That's going to open some doors.
Yep.
I was trying to think of who they may or may not introduce, if they introduce the new doctor, Dr. Franklin. And gosh, it's Bill Mooney's character. His name is escaping me for the moment. I don't know why, but Lanier.
Yep.
If he comes into the next episode, because if you noted, both of those characters were credited in this episode and do not appear.
Well, Lanier absolutely is a big part in Soul Hunter, because he's assisting Delenn through all of that little fun stuff.
I kind of thought Lanier might have actually appeared in this one, just wasn't named. But
nope, he was named in the credits, but he did not appear.
Okay.
He actually, I think, if I remember right, and again, I haven't watched these in binge mode because I've been waiting to catch up with all these guys. But if I remember right, the first scene of Soul Hunter is Lanier getting off the ship.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I think that will wrap it up for this week. I appreciate it, guys. I'm looking forward to having the newbies hate us for a while. And then about 2 or 3 years from now, if they're really feeling like they want to annoy the crap out of themselves, they can come back and listen to this again. I'll say, hi, everybody. Thanks for listening to me and not listening to this for a while. I appreciate it. You can find us at anchor.fm/Gray17 podcast. Next week, again, we'll be talking Soul Hunter. We'll start talking with our newbie friends and then move over here and do some spoiler talk again. Appreciate you all coming on this journey with us. And hopefully that we can continue on as we go through some interesting times with season 1 and then kick it into full gear as we get to the end of season 1 and as well as jumping into season 2 here before we know it. So until next time, I have been Scott, and with me has been
Blake.
Yeah, Mike.
I'm sorry. Here, open my wrist.
Centauri don't have major arteries in their wrists.
Of course we don't. What do you think? I'm stupid?